Hi, this is Mark Sehl for the YouTube channel Therapy for the Heart, and I'm going to speak off the top of my spontaneous self as much as possible because I wanted to do that. And I was going to talk about projection and projective identification because some people have requested that. And I thought about some experiences that I've had this morning, actually. But in order to start that talk, I was thinking about my work in Rikers Island, the prison, and inmates and the guards. And in projection, we put feelings that we have onto our other people that we're close to or not close to. So somebody might say, "Well, you're angry with me," or "I think you're angry with me." They're putting those feelings of their own anger into the other person, unless that person is really angry with them, and then it's the objective reality. But mostly it's subjective, and instead of owning one's own feelings, "I'm angry at you for whatever reason," we say, "Well, I think you're angry at me." So projective identification is really somebody says something to someone like, "You look depressed." You think about it, and all of a sudden, well, maybe I am depressed, and then you become depressed. You identify with that person's projection onto you of depression, and because we carry all these self-attacks within us, then the self-attacks start, and there's something wrong with me because I'm depressed. So you identify with this other person's criticism of you. You take it on yourself, and that's why it's called projective identification. And I'm not even sure if I have that right, and I don't want to be technical about it, but I wanted to talk about it more spontaneously than from the book. So we all project, every human being. That's how we have empathy for other people, is we can kind of get a sense of how they feel about how we might feel in a particular situation, and then that projection is one of the facets of empathy and compassion. But then when it's not empathy and compassion, it becomes can be often a lot of has to do with a lot of self-attacks that we have against ourselves. So bring it back to a personal experience that I had the other day. I was looking at somebody and I said to myself, well, they're full of themselves. They think a lot of themselves, and why was I thinking that of them? That was an attack on them, and I don't know anything about them. It was just some feeling I had, right? Often we go by feelings that we have. Well, they're not often accurate. They're projections. So I was thinking about that attack that I was making on this person in my own mind. I wouldn't be doing it to them, hopefully, but I was curious about why I was thinking that way. And then I thought about the prisons and the guards where I worked, and how the inmates were very much like the guards, and the guards were very much like the inmates. And in that atmosphere, there was a lot of sadism, particularly of the guards towards the inmates. And so I thought, well, the prisoners and the guards, they're all carrying their own projections on each other, but they don't identify them as projections. They identify it, well, the other guy is the bad guy. It's not me. So the victims, the prisoners are the inmates are the victims of the guards, and the guards are the victims of the inmates. Neither one acknowledges their own sadistic impulses. So let's say my attack on that person was some derivative of a sadistic, mean impulse, right? So it's really the guard's responsibilities to own the projection. It's like in society, we all suffer from each other's at the hands of each other, but in my opinion, it's the role of the parents and the authorities to own the projection rather than the people who really are more the victims, like the people who are in prison. Most of them are in prison because of drug use and drug abuse, and they shouldn't be in there for that reason. It's a disease, so they should be treated for it. Children shouldn't be punished. Doesn't help them. We have background noise here of the fire department. So back to projection. So I was thinking about this in the restaurant, and I was looking at this person and feeling, what's my need to put myself above this person? You know what it was? It was really interesting. it's early in the morning. I get breakfast and coffee before I start to work. So I was sitting there in Lenny's restaurant, and I was working on my iPhone, getting my messages, and this person was doing the same thing, but I was critical of her. Oh, people are always on their iPhones. They're always getting their messages. They're always. I was thinking, well, why am I being critical of this person because I'm doing the same thing, right? But I'll put that onto her and be critical of her for it. Why? So I was thinking, well, that makes myself feel better than her in some way. It's out there. I can boost my own feelings of insecurity and about myself through being. Then I thought, well, where does this come from? What's this all about? And I've been an analyst in analysis for many years. And by the way, just because you've been in analysis, these things are very hard to figure out. The real emotional context of what you're curious about is very difficult. And I really got that this morning as an analyst. I don't know, I've gotten it before, but it really struck home because I began to think about what the self-criticisms were and why I have a need to do that, to put somebody else down. And I kept thinking about it, and then I thought about my father. When I used to fight with my father, box in the kitchen, when he would hit me, in the nose, with boxing gloves and everything, and I would start to cry, he would laugh at me. He had this contemptuous laugh. And I remember this a lot in analysis, and I didn't like it, and I could feel myself a little angry with him, but not really. And today, I really identify with how he could put himself above me by beating me, a kid who was 8 years old, and then laughing with contempt at me. And what I did in my life was to take that contempt and turn it around on myself and call myself names like foolish, you're stupid. My father had a lot of contempt for people. And I thought, well, that's how he put himself above other people. My mother used to be angry with him a lot because she thought he should have been accomplished more. He should have been a writer. He was a great writer, but he didn't do anything with it. He was a civil servant, and he's worked hard. And I love my father, and I appreciated all that he did for me. That doesn't mean I can't be angry with him. And I got very emotional when I thought about what I do to myself, because what he did to me, the contempt, is the contempt that I can find in myself and when I call myself names. And it was a very emotional recognition that I had, and there's no wonder why people don't want to be in therapy. Because what we do to ourselves is the same thing that was done to us. And it's pretty bad. It's pretty hard to recognize and come to terms with that. But if you can live more comfortable, compassionate way with yourself, instead of self-attacking. And on these tapes, I talk a lot about Spotnitz. And one of the things he said was the cause of the symptoms of mental illness is the way that aggression is handled by the individual, and namely in depression, it's turned against the self. I'm worthless. I'm a piece of shit. My father, contempt for me because that's how he elevated himself up. And I turned that around and said to myself, I'm weak, I'm stupid for crying, attacking myself in all these different ways. So in depression, that's how it manifests itself. This is from the book, but it's really real. People who are depressed attack themselves. People in psychosomatic illness, that aggression goes towards the bodily organs. So you have ulcers. I cried a lot when I thought about this morning, and I was really in such a rage because of my father was such a prick with me. Yes, he was a good man, but he was also a prick because he had to put himself above me by having contempt for me when he hit me, and then I would cry. He laughed. So that's not a nice thing to do. And then I thought about also a lot of other things that happened in my childhood that led to me and who I am, that I need to remember so I don't repeat it. I don't repeat it with myself or with my friends, my lovers, or my children. But we do tend to repeat these things. So we might find ourselves being contentious over our children, being competitive with them, attacking them. But I don't want to do that to myself. And that was the hardest thing for me to come to terms with, is the ill treatment of myself based upon how I was treated. It's very unconscious. It lies in the depths of our souls. Most of the time we defend our parents and those who are close to us, because it's very hard to hate someone who also you feel dependent upon and has been very important to you in your life. But that hate does go into the internal. I could feel it in my stomach. I could feel my stomach clench up really tight. And if you don't have any release for these feelings, that's how it goes into the body. And how do we know that that's not the cause of cancer? Or, I mean, they did a study once about cancer, schizophrenia. I think it was in cancer. I'm not sure, schizophrenia. I think it wasn't. I think it was about cancer. But how when people went into remission because they could acknowledge their depression and also their rage, and how they pictured cancer was jaws and eating away, and rage. And when people repress things and feelings, I had a patient once, and he said, when I stopped my medication, I started to have angry dreams. When I stopped my medication, I started to have angry dreams. So where does the anger go? That's a very profound thought. When I stopped my medication, I had angry dreams. Well, that anger doesn't go away. The medication is a mask for the anger, but it doesn't take care of it. And that's why people have a lot of misconceptions about medication, that it's a cure-all. I remember listening to Prozac, the book that came out that made that guy very famous about Prozac. But there was a little footnote in there on how there was some association between in mice and taking the medication and the growth of tumors. And I said, well, that's in a little footnote there, tucked away, So I want to talk a lot about this in my papers, about how this aggression is internalized. And the worst thing that I found today is how it goes against the self. I don't want to treat myself badly and call myself stupid and all the different names that I could think of, because that's attacking myself. And I want to have compassion for myself, and I want to work on that very hard. And I want to help you work on it very hard by listening to these tapes. But it's a very hard thing to convey to people. I wanted to get real here because when you write up a paper, and I do my tapes, and it's kind of organized, I like that way. But I like to also have some kind of spontaneity here. And maybe it's hard for you to hear that somebody has this person who's talking to you about how to get healthy, and maybe it's hard to look at somebody and say, well, they have problems too. But also maybe it's good to you to see that the teachers, the therapists, the analysts, they're human too, and they also have problems, and they've worked them out to some extent. We're not perfect. It's not a perfect world, but so I discovered a lot about myself this morning in a short space of time. I want to learn to be compassionate towards myself, not treat myself the same way that I was treated by those who, quote unquote, loved me. Yeah, they did in their own way, but it wasn't a very good job often. And I did pay a price for it. So again, it's the self-attacks. Have compassion for yourself. You just can't write a book about that. You can't write a book and say how to have compassion. Don't attack yourself. It wouldn't sell much because people just read it and it wouldn't mean anything. Just like this tape probably is not going to mean that much. But maybe it'll hit some chords, and some people listen and say, well, yeah, I do that to myself too. And be curious about, why do you? Why do you call yourself stupid and a piece of shit and worthless, What's that all about? What's that all about? Now, that's what I did this morning, and I really got to it, and I'm going to start to get emotional right now. So I'm going to I'm going to check that.